We're going to turn all these little pieces right here into these right here. Let's build some shocks. So building up some new shocks for my four-wheel drive B74.1. I'm just going to show you how I do it. Others do it different. You can look and you'll find maybe 100 different ways on building shocks. This is how I've always done it. And I'm going to show you how I do it. So first off, you got all your pieces out here ready to go. The only really tool you need a 1.5 pair of shock pliers. These are very, very handy for multiple things. These happen to be ProTech RC ones off A-Main. Had them forever. JConcepts, they have a really nice pair. And my boy Ray Dog at Sticky Kicks has a really dialed pair. Lots of different functions with those, so I'll put links in the bottom. I'm going to build these up. These happen to be the rear shocks, so I'm using 31mm bodies, 29 shafts. I got the kit 1.7 two holes in there, and I drilled one of the holes out to a 1.8. That was a pro tip from my buddy. So let's just get going here. I'm using 1-Up blue. This is your O-ring grease. Basically green slime from Associated, same stuff. With this, I just find it's just super nice. So what I'll do, I'll get all my rings, you don't need a lot. Get a little bit on your fingers. Just rub those around a little bit. It just makes these adjustment ones that go on the collars a little easier to spin on and off for adjusting your right height. And also just kind of lubes them up a little bit and let them dry out. The newer plastics they use for these rings are pretty dang good. They're not like the old school ones that dried out a lot, swelled up. So one of your large O-rings goes on the top. I always forget to put this one on. I always remember it after I put all the oil in there and it gets everywhere. So that's gonna be my new step one. Seat that down in there. And then these ones go on the bottom. Just roll those down on there. Make sure they're set down in that little groove. And these other two, never built shocks before, but there's a little groove inside this ring. So this is your adjustment for your ride height. Oops, let me get it on the camera there. Kind of just pop those in there and they'll find their way into that groove eventually here. I gotta cheat. There it is. Okay, make sure those are all seated in there, which those ones are. That's good. And then we're going to basically now we're going to make the bottom part of this thing. Oh, actually, you can put these on there. Let's put these on there first. So when you thread these on, be very careful. These are very, very shallow threads on these shock bodies, and you can cross thread them pretty quick. So what I always do is you'll feel the resistance from that O-ring in there. And you want to push that on until you can feel it hit that first thread, and then just slowly turn it a few cranks on there. Make sure that thing's on there, so it's in there now, and run those all the way up to the top. Okay, now you got that done. We're going to build the bottom pack. I've always called them packs. Maybe that's not what they're called. So on your parts tree, you're going to have some They're including the X-rings now, which are really nice. These are low friction compared to the old school orange O-rings or red, whatever color they are. These things are way better. They don't break down. They're smoother. So basically, got these little hats, and what I like to do is just grab my wrench and build them on there. So your hat, if you're looking at it as a hat, your top is always basically facing out, so that the top of your hat's going to basically come out of the bottom of that. So that'll be pointing down. Taking one of your X-rings, dip it in some good stuff there, and I always just use my shock shaft because when you assemble it, you got to put some on there anyway, so I might as well just use it now. Get ahead of the game there. Ooh, this new jar is really deep. So I'm basically just pre-building everything that's going to go on there. And you got your middle spacer. You're making a little sandwich here. So like I said, it's green slime from Associated, or the blue O-ring grease from 1UP Racing. That's what you need. So there you go. Whip the tip of that down. So there's your pack that goes in there. I got the lips of them pointing out each way. Basically, the top of your hats are, hang loose in there. And when you don't want to shove it in there, so you don't want to mar anything in there. These are all nice and clean inside, no nicks, nothing. So gently work that into the bottom of that shock body and just slide that whole stack in there. Get some of the schmutz off of there. Get that little press down in there, seat it in there. And then you're going to take your bottom piece. Same thing on those threads. You want to just go nice and easy till you know what's in there. Give it a nice little... Now you can use your shock pliers on there, but I got big man hands, so I don't really need to do that. Nice and tight. Your hat sticking out of the bottom of that thing. And that one's done. We'll pop this other one together. There we go. So we got that done. And now we come on to building up these shock shafts. Really nothing fancy too much here. Let's just make sure you're protecting them. You don't want these nicked or burred or anything like that, because that's going to get in there and wreak havoc with your seal, and your shocks are going to be leaking, or they will not be smooth. So you might as well do it right. I'm using 29mm shafts here. You got your... Oh, I got the camera. Got some camera wobble there. Okay. Put your washer on there first. If you don't do that, you'll think something's all goofy when you go to tighten this thing up, and it won't be. And I always point whatever... Oh boy, that almost went on the floor. You want to put your numbers facing up, so you know what pistons you got in there. Load that on there. Little tiny bit of Loctite, just enough. I've had a screw back out before. In the olden days, you had E-clips in there, and those things would break. So a little Loctite on there. And then double check with the shock pliers. You don't need to really over tighten it, but make sure it's snugged up in there. That Loctite will dry up, and I'll hold that screw in there. Okay, now that's done. Got the pistons installed. So another little trick. I used to do it before. I think I probably invented this one, but no one will believe me. For a while there, I drilled some bowling balls back in the day, and when you get the bowling balls engraved, there's I believe it was like a crayon type deal. You rub over the top, get the ball, polish the ball up, and what happens is that paint from that crayon thing went down inside the where you had it etched, and that's how you get the names on the bowling balls. So kind of the same concept here. You want to take the black Sharpie. You can get a fine tip one and actually go down in the numbers, but this works just as good. And basically you just wipe off the excess, and you have to do it a few times, but it'll leave where you can see what actual the piston is. So that's just an easy way if you're rebuilding shocks or can't remember what you got in there, and you don't have a sticker. Something like this works just fine. So get that done. Now we're basically going to be assembling these. So you want to double check in there, make sure you don't have any debris. This is usually a real clean workspace for when you're doing shocks or anything with friction material, ball diffs, gear diffs. You want everything clean. Don't try to do this just on a random tabletop. Grab a paper towel. That way you have everything. You don't forget parts. You have everything nice and clean, nothing else getting in there. So then what we'll do is finish assembling these once I get this lid off of here. So take a little bit more and get those threads coated or whatever with your O-ring grease. And I'm not running any limiters on the rears. So you want to get that kind of started and just gently guide it through. You'll feel the threads kind of grab, but you just want to go nice and easy on that so you're not ripping apart anything inside of there. There you go. That's that. Keep a towel with you too at all times. You're going to be dealing with some stuff here. So on the four-wheel drives, I've always ran an O-ring for an external. That's just what I've always done. It kind of lessens that impact. You could put plastic on there, but there's a little extra cushion in there. To me, it helps blowing your shocks up. I like to land hard. I don't know. I don't have a style. I just drive it. But we're going to throw these eyelets on there. Once again, using those shock pliers. And just slowly start. Make sure that thing's going on there straight. And I just crank it up to basically the top of the threads before I set my stroke. That way they're both the same. There's that. And what I use for these is I think these are Traxxas low friction rings. They might have called them X rings too. These were cheaper back in the day, but now Associated pretty much includes them with their kit, so you don't need to buy them for the internals. But like I said, that just if you're going to bottom it out, that just gives a little cushion on there to help out. So now here's the part where I think a lot of confusion is on what to do, how much oil, how to bleed them. There's many different ways. I follow kind of what Spencer Rivkin does on his as far as bleeding them goes. But what I do here, now you don't have to use, I'm using a shock pump. That this basically just speeds things up. Creates a vacuum in there, sucks all those air bubbles out. I'm putting 40 in the back. So what I'll do is I'll get them not all the way full initially, about 3/4, half to 3/4, and then I I pump them up pretty good, make sure all the bubbles get out of the bottom, and pull it all the way back down. I leave it in that down position. Yeah, so you don't want to fill them up initially all the way, especially when you're using a shock pump, because it will draw that oil out of there and you have a pretty good mess going on. So if you don't have a shock pump, get to this point, you can let them sit. Basically, if you look in there, you can see the air bubbles. They're going to work their way to the top. But to speed things up, I've always just used a shock pump. So you can look in there, that really makes those bubbles go. So we'll let that sit for a few minutes, you know, until you stop seeing the bubbles, and then we'll go from there. Okay, those are almost done, so set that aside. While those are finishing up drawing out those air bubbles, on your caps, bleeder screws, I always put these in first before I go to try to do it on after I fill them up with oil and put them on. That way you just know it's less, you take your time, you don't cross thread it, you don't over tighten it. That's the key here on these. You just tighten it up till you feel it kind of get snug, and then leave it at that. You don't have to over crank it. Bleeder caps are your friend. Okay, let's burp these shocks and see what we're looking at. So I don't know if you can tell, but they're bubble free. So what I'll do now is slowly top off these shocks. Try to just get a good flow going in there, so you're not adding a bunch of air bubbles. And I fill them up just as they start to crown. I don't know how. All right, so apparently I hit the stop button when I was recording this whole shock thing. So I happened to be at the track today, and I just redid some stuff on my shocks. So I'm gonna pick up where I left off after we pump all the air out of these suckers. So what I did is I top off the actual shock body until, you know, you can see it almost kind of dome on the top. So that way I have enough oil in there. Got the bleeder screw loaded up on my wrench, and I'll show you how I bleed these suckers. So I do the Spencer Rifkin method. So the key to these is you want to make sure they're not getting cross-threaded. So kind of spin it backwards until you feel it kind of seat in there, and then go ahead and slowly thread it, and you'll feel it catch and grab, and know you're not going to cross-thread that thing. So we're going to get that tight. Got the bleeder screw out, shaft's fully extended, and get yourself your paper towel. And what I'll do is I'll just, you know, on the actual, knock everything over here, is I'm just going to be pushed down on that shock body, and what that does is that obviously it pushes that piston all the way up, and you're going to see air, you're going to see oil come out. There'll be a little oil that comes out, and as I'm still holding it down, we're going to put the bleeder screw in there, and you just want to tighten it up just enough where you feel it. Once you feel it snug up, don't go any further, because you don't want to strip that out. Get that cleaned up a little bit. So that's pretty good. And then what I'll do, and this is what Spencer does, he pumps it up a few times, gets a little pressure in there, and we're just gonna do that bleeder process. Yep, so we got a little rebound in there. So we're just gonna redo that bleeding process again. So I pull it all the way out. You know, you can tell there's just a little bit too much oil in there. So pull that bleeder screw back out. Oops, pit table's a little wobbly here. And we're just gonna do it one more time, nice and slow. A little bit of air came out there. Thread that bleeder screw back in. And that's it. That's how we do it. So if you take your time, get yourself those shock pliers, and do it a few times. It's going to be all right. So what I just noticed today after a few practice runs, builds up a lot of pressure in those shocks. So as it's on the car, or if I pull them off, I just basically compress everything down, pull that screw out, burp it, put it right back in, and shocks are right back where they want to be, nice and dead. So, well, thanks for watching. That's how I do shocks, and give you a little glimpse here where I'm at today. A lot better than being in my shop. Die Hard RC in Snohomish, Washington, Turf GP, and we're gonna have a good weekend. Thanks for watching.